Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This right here is Drunk TV, everybody. Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us for this, our very first episode. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce to you, I'm Jason, and my co-host, Del. Del, how's it going?
Yeah, fantastic. This
is our very first podcast. This is the series premiere, the Drunk TV series premiere. How exciting is that?
That's pretty awesome. Hopefully we don't get too drunk.
Well, hey, it's just a show where we will watch an episode of a TV show from a different era, a different genre, and then we just sit around and BS about it. And it's not Drunk TV because we're actually drunk, because we're not drunk, at least not yet. But we're like getting drunk on TV, almost, you could say. We're just having fun is what the main crux of this program's about. First of all, tune in, listen. That's the first step. But hit the like button, hit the share button, send us a comment, whether you're listening on iTunes, whether you're listening on YouTube, or you're on Stitcher or Podomatic, or wherever you're catching us at, straight from our webpage, which is drunktvpodcast.com. Whatever you do, though, send us a comment and talk to us. Let us know what you think, and especially correct us if we're wrong, or if in the middle of these discussions, if you're a fan of something we're talking about and we totally blow something, talk to us about it in the comments and just let us know you're out there.
Yeah, feel free to correct us if we make an ass of ourselves. We take anything, constructive criticism, or just tell us what you like about it, and we're going to keep doing things like that. We want to make sure that you guys are enjoying this, because that's what it's all about.
And we're going to totally screw things up, because that's just what we're here for, and that's kind of what we do, which is why we're doing a podcast. Because I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of stuff right on here, but that's part of the fun of it, because we're watching these shows kind of as if it's our first time seeing them, and we're giving you our opinion, our take, a little bit of historical stuff. With the internet, you can do a lot of research. You can find out a lot of stuff that perhaps you didn't know, and stuff that we find interesting. And so we're just going to throw it out there, lay it out there on you, and see what you have to say about it, and hope that you enjoy what we're talking about.
We're trying to keep an open mind about all this, so we're going to be throwing things here and there that, like Jason just said, about what we see personally and then what people are talking about. And we're just doing this based upon the pilot episodes of TV shows. So maybe in the future we may do further episodes into shows after we get to a certain point. But I think as far as the first year of this is concerned, we're just going to stick to pilot episodes and just kind of get a wide range of different types of TV shows, that span different genres, so different eras, all kinds of stuff, just to get a lot out there, see what people think about it.
And with that said, also, if you have a show that you would like us to talk about, just feel free to pass that along. We'll see if we try to add it to the list. Here's the deal. I got a paper clip, a bottle cap, a bobby pin, and an empty bottle of tequila. And I have to get from here to Las Vegas. What do I do?
Don't look at me.
You have no idea, but who would know what to do?
Well, that would be MacGyver.
That would be MacGyver, because MacGyver would take those items I just said. He'd probably need a stick of gum too, but he would add a little bit of super glue and he would create a helicopter and make that trip to Vegas. I'm pretty sure that's what that's what people remember MacGyver for doing.
They've actually created the term MacGyverisms for the fact that he can take any rudimentary thing and build something fantastic out of it, just to solve many situations. And the whole show was kind of based around this fact that he was a genius, some kind of scientist or engineer, or a mix of all this. He's very well educated, obviously, but he just takes anything in an environment around him, any rudimentary thing, and solves problems with them.
And that was the whole shtick of the show. And before we dive into this first episode, the pilot episode of MacGyver, also should tell you that obviously there's going to be some spoilers. We're talking about the episode. It aired on September 29th, 1985. So, this is decades old. But the thing of it is, if you haven't watched it in a long time, or if you've never seen it, hit pause on the podcast, track it down. I can't tell you if it's streaming on one of the streaming services, but it's definitely on DVD. And I at one point I checked, and the whole episode was actually on YouTube also for free for people to watch. And so you can probably track it down and just watch it before you listen to us if you don't want to be spoiled, and if you want to enjoy the conversation a little bit more. And that's what we're going to tell you at the beginning of each of our episodes before we really dive in and start talking about what's going on.
Yeah, it definitely helps if you guys watch the episodes too before you watch or listen to this this podcast, because then you actually know what we're talking about. We bring up a lot of little things here and there throughout the episode. I mean, you can always listen if you haven't seen it. Maybe it'll get you interested in it and you'll want to watch it. But at the same time, it's probably a better idea to go and watch that. And as far as I remember, I think they do have MacGyver on Netflix. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, and that's, of course, at the time of this recording. And Netflix, of course, as you know, as all the streaming services do, you know, shows will be on the service and then they'll be taken off the service, all depending on where the rights holders are at and making deals and stuff. So yeah, just search it out. We actually just watched the DVD version, season 1 DVD.
That's right.
And but yeah, it's out there. So go get it, go grab it, take a quick viewing of it, quick screening, come back and listen in. Otherwise, we're going to dive right into it. Doing a quick little run of research for MacGyver. The show ran for 7 seasons on ABC and various other networks abroad from 1985 to 1992. So the series was filmed in Los Angeles during seasons 1, 2, and 7, and then in Vancouver, seasons 3 through 6. The show's final episode aired on April 25th, 1992 on ABC. So it spanned 2 decades. It was I guess you'd call it an 80s series from, you know, the latter half of the 80s and also in the early part of the 90s. People got to see it. The show follows secret agent, they call it in my research. I'm not sure he's a secret. He kind of is a secret agent, I guess.
I guess, you know, there was some kind of that government team or whatever that pulled him in for this first episode.
Yeah. So. And his name's MacGyver, played by Richard Dean Anderson. He works as a troubleshooter for the fictional Phoenix Foundation in Los Angeles and as an agent for fictional United States government agency, the Department of External Services, okay, otherwise known as DXS. Oh. Educated as a scientist, MacGyver served as a bomb team technician during the Vietnam War. Resourceful and possessed of an encyclopedic knowledge of the physical sciences, he solves complex problems with everyday materials he finds at hand, along with his duct tape and Swiss Army knife. We did see that Swiss Army knife in this first episode.
We did.
And he prefers nonviolent resolutions and prefers not to handle a gun, which we'll talk a little bit about later, because he actually handles a gun in this first pilot episode.
Very first
and there's
episode.
some talk on the internet about how, you know, some of the stuff wasn't really established as far as the character goes, you know, as is the case with a lot of pilot episodes.
Yeah, he never really mentioned anything. He didn't come out right away in the episode or at all in this first episode and say, you know, I don't like guns. As far as I remember, I don't think he said anything about it. But yeah, it clearly showed that he doesn't like to use them as, you know, lethal, because even though he did have a gun in the first episode here, he never did anything but strike somebody with it. Like he clubbed a guy across the face with it or whatever, with the butt of the gun. But other than that, he never shot anybody. So,
which has to be done sometimes.
Yeah,
even if you're MacGyver and you don't like to use guns.
Sometimes you just got to club people in the face. Yeah.
So the very first scene, of MacGyver episodes were what the MacGyver community called the opening gambit, or maybe even the production team called it that, but they were called the opening gambit. This was the part of the episode before the opening credits, before the theme song, that was basically just, it's kind of like the beginning of a James Bond movie. It usually it had nothing to do with the actual episode itself. It was just like a little mini adventure. And this very first episode establishes that. And MacGyver was aired on generally Monday nights before, it was the lead-in to Monday Night Football in the falls. And so I just wonder if some of the marketing that was maybe done at the time, because this is kind of a guy-centric show. You got a macho dude who's, I mean, definitely the female audience can get behind it too, because he's kind of a sweet guy, soft-spoken and man of adventure and action. But with all the explosions and excitement and the cool science element where he's able to solve problems like he does, that probably appealed to a lot of people who are maybe getting set to watch a Monday Night Football game too, you know, that guy audience.
Yeah, he's definitely like an even-keeled genius that, you know, everybody can kind of get behind. You know, right away when you see the character, you like him, like immediately. Anybody, I'm sure, enjoys watching him because he seems like he's a nice guy, but he's funny too, and he doesn't get pushed around. He knows what he's doing. He's going to do what he's going to do. So I think everybody can kind of get behind that. And what you were talking about with these openings, what did you call them?
The opening gambit.
The opening gambit, yeah. It kind of is similar to even shows that aren't in this genre that do things similar to it, where it has an opening before the credits that do nothing for the episode. Like, for example, The Office, they always do like a cold opening, is what they call it, for like they throw in a little joke or whatever at the beginning, but it has nothing to do with the episode, and then they jump right into it after the credits. So it's kind of cool, I mean, it's interesting, and it catches your interest right away, even though it has nothing to do with the episode. It's just kind of a cool little thing to throw in there.
Well, this episode, too, is not, we mentioned this off air, was not an origin episode at all. It didn't talk about who MacGyver was, where he came from, or anything like this. It basically just jumps right into the action. So I'm trying to put myself as a viewer in fall of 1985 talking about, or getting ready perhaps to watch the NFL, and that probably depends on where you're at too, because the NFL game would air live, so obviously it's airing at a different time if you're on the West Coast compared to the East Coast. So I suppose MacGyver could have aired before or maybe even after Monday Night Football, depending on where you're at, in the United States at the time, and that's something that somebody would have to look up, or tell us in the comments if you remember how that actually worked out. But at any rate, the way that this first episode starts out, it's very unassuming. It's actually shot and looks like a pretty big, high-quality production. And the very first shot that we see is really this kind of awesome opening shot of this kind of mountainous landscape. It almost, I don't know, in my mind I thought of like kind of like Grand Canyon type of thing.
I was just going to say that it reminded me of the Grand Canyon when it first opened, the opening shot. It's kind of this giant, it's a canyon, it
says cool, somewhere in Central Asia is where this is.
It's kind of like a desert-y type setting, it's very dry out there, but it's a huge canyon, and you just catch a glimpse of MacGyver climbing up this huge wall face, just like climbing up, and as the camera kind of pans up over this like plateau, you see all these soldiers up at the top and some kind of destroyed plane or something, and a little camp set up. So it just starts off with that. So you're like, okay, what the heck's going on here? Why is he sneaking up this mountain over here?
And that had to be a stunt guy in the wide shots on the side of the.
Because that was obviously back.
I'm crapping my pants if that's me.
They didn't have CG like they do nowadays, and it's obviously a real shot, so they had to have had a stuntman up there, because this is clearly a huge cliff face that he's just kind of hanging on.
Well, I've been to neither the Grand Canyon or Central Asia, so I can't tell you exactly where it was probably shot, and I didn't find that info anywhere on the internet. It's probably out there somewhere. But he is high up on this rock mountain. But eventually, he, like you said, he climbs up to the top. And one of the first things we both noticed was he's wearing this silly red beanie hat when he gets up there. And I'm thinking, isn't he trying to not stand out?
Yeah, it's this little. It's got the little ball on the top, like one of those weird, goofy Christmas type beanies that you'd see like a little kid wearing. And he just pops his head up right there, and it's like, I can understand if it's, the windy up there and you got to keep your ears warm or whatever, but why pick something that's so brightly colored and stands out with this stupid ball on the top? I don't know. It was just kind of funny.
Now, one bit of information I did find was that the first season of the show was shot entirely in the Los Angeles area, according to information that I found online. However, as an adventure series, ABC was ready to cancel it after the first year due to the price of location filming and the time spent moving production crew over a 6-day shoot schedule. And 6 days was about average, I think, for a weekly show being shot like that, And with the threat of cancellation, the producers decided to send the show to Vancouver, where location moves could be made apparently within an hour. So they could just like up and move the whole production. And in one day, an episode could move from an ocean scene to a forest scene to a metropolitan scene, because Vancouver, you know, has all that stuff just kind of right there ready.
It's almost like, yeah, like different settings and almost like a, not really like a biome, but you know what I mean? Kind of different environments that are all within, you know, an hour of each other. It's all kind of clustered together there. And yeah, I could see that.
But as far as the pilot goes, you know, I mean, who knows where they shot this opening gambit at, because they're trying to impress. This is the very first episode.
Yeah, it looked fantastic too. But anyways, yeah.
Well, one thing you saw with the opening gambit, and this was your first time seeing this episode, yeah?
Yeah, actually,
we screened it before we. I had seen it. I'd watched it before, but we screened it before we did the podcast just to refresh. And
yeah, I'd seen the show before, but I had started somewhere in the middle of it. I don't even remember what season, but I watched a handful of episodes. I haven't really watched a lot of this show, but I know for a fact that I had never seen the opening, like the pilot episode. So it was kind of interesting to watch that.
Now, one of the cute things about these opening gambits for MacGyver, if I remember right, this is just how it is on every episode. There's kind of an analogy being narrated by MacGyver while he is doing whatever it is he's doing in these opening scenes. In this case, he was talking about Hector, a horse, if I remember right, that he used to ride as a kid.
It was something about a horse that he was trying to get the courage up to ride or something along those lines, and it was just his story about, you know, trying to overcome this problem. But everything that he's doing in the episode while this narration is going on, it's an analogy for what's actually happening on screen in some way, and it was actually really cleverly done.
Yeah, it was really well done, because his whole reason for being up there is he's trying to disable this missile that's being...
Yeah, some sort of rocket that this... but these soldiers have a camp up there on the top of this like plateau, and they've got some sort of rocket hold up there. And
the analogy was that this rocket is basically the horse.
Yeah.
And if I understood it right, what was going on, you know, and he had to tame that horse when he was younger so that he could ride it. And he even said at some point when he was like trying to disable this rocket that, you know, sometimes you just got to tame the horse, or otherwise it'll take off on you just like a rocket.
It'll take off like a speeding rocket. Yeah. I thought another little part of the analogy that was really clever is when he actually got up to the top there and took on the disguise of one of the soldiers, and he's sitting there surveying the scene, and he sees how many soldiers there are. They've got a captive, and you know what kind of things he's dealing with, and he makes something along the lines in the analogy of now that I get closer to him, you know, talking about the horse, now that I get closer to him, I didn't realize how big he was, you know, and you know, it's starting to get a little nervous, you know, it wasn't how I expected it to be when I was dreaming about it last night, which he's talking about the horse, but you can clearly see the look of shock on his face kind of, and you know, he's trying to see the setting and realizes what kind of deep shit he's got himself into.
Well, and I wondered too, because he's kind of like Rambo a little bit. He's got to take on like this small army to get to this rocket and save a survivor, which he didn't plan on, because I think he says something like, I didn't know there were any survivors.
Yeah, it was something that was completely unexpected to him, which was part of that analogy that I was talking about, because he sees like how many soldiers there are, what kind of landscape he's in, and then he sees the hostage, and so all of this is kind of a shock to him. So,
and like he says, he goes, so much for Hector, and then he comes up behind the one military dude, you know, and
knocks him out.
Well, yeah, I was like, did he snap his neck, or you know, I would say, well, probably not. It's MacGyver, but
something non-lethal.
But he did something really fast, and by the time you see MacGyver come back up behind the little barricade, he's actually wearing that soldier's clothes, so he can kind of sneak in and do what he needs to do.
That was very cool. It's actually kind of a concept they did with that video game series Hitman. The whole game, there was a big aspect about doing stuff like that. You got to sneak up on people, take them out, and steal their disguise, and you got to blend in, which is kind of cool. And it was just interesting to watch it on this show, you know, like how they did that. It was kind of cool.
And you see that in tons of movies and TV
yeah.
shows and adventure and action shows and stuff and video games. And so it's nothing new, but it's always
interesting.
It's always fun to watch. It's always fun to see that type of stuff happen.
Him standing there nonchalant, trying to look away from these soldiers as they're checking him out, like, oh, what's going on? And then they finally, well, whatever, and they walk away.
And I thought it was kind of funny how when he actually does he takes out that soldier, and then when he comes back up, he's wearing that other soldier's hat. Instead of the beanie, obviously, and he put the jacket on, the military guy's jacket on, but also he I thought it was cute how he kind of just steals his coffee and takes a drink of the guy's coffee.
Yeah.
Well, he did just climb up that big frickin' rock, so he's probably he needs a little energy, a little pick me up.
Yep.
And one thing I thought interesting about the production of that too is that obviously you're mixing footage with the actors and stunt actors, and when MacGyver gets to the top, you can see in the background what looks like the huge valley that from where he climbed up. And so I don't know if that was like a matte painting background or just green screened in or rear projectioned in or any, because you see MacGyver in the foreground like he had just climbed up this big precipice. And by MacGyver I mean Richard Dean Anderson, not the stunt guy who was on the side of that mountain in the wide shot when we first saw it. So yeah, but I just thought it was great. You don't even think about it because it's done so well, even for a 1985 TV show, which to me looked like a very high budget TV show, or at least episode.
Yeah, this first episode, it looked like they had a very good budget for it. They were throwing out all sorts of special effects and these crazy backdrops and helicopters and these giant observatory buildings and all kinds of stuff, and it looked like it was very high budget for this first episode.
The entire episode, all the sets were really impressive, and we'll get to that as we go along here and talk more about this episode. But so far, just in this opening bit, again, so this is the pilot episode. There hasn't been a opening credits yet, so nobody knows what the hell they're watching when it just comes on, except for those people who had read TV Guide and said, "Oh, MacGyver, let's watch this new show." So yeah, people who were just tuning in and it just came on. It's almost like there's this life and death stuff going on, but he's so nonchalant about it.
Yeah, he always keeps calm and cool, which actually later on in the episode, I pointed out the fact that he's climbing through this kind of thin tunnel in this facility that's, booby-trapped, and he's just climbing through this tiny little crawl space, basically, and you can just hear him whistling, all nonchalant, like, oh, whatever, not even a big deal. And it's like anybody else would be panicking and freaking out because they're like, I don't know what's coming out of this, like, I don't know where I'm going to end up. But yeah, he just keeps his cool through everything, which is kind of funny to see.
Now, MacGyver's Swiss Army knife, apparently, according to internet research, went through a few changes over the early episodes. His first and most often used knife was a Spartan model from Victorinox, and I don't even know if I'm saying that right. And the knife, but the knife scene,
I don't know, you got me. It's blowing my mind.
The knife scene in the opening credits of each episode was a Wenger, Wenger, and again, I don't even know how to say that, as noted by its long keychain, which I found interesting because we actually see his Swiss Army knife, or at least one version of it, in this opening scene. And the funny part is he finds the guy who is actually in this wooden cage, this survivor from this crash that he's going to save. And he pulls out his Swiss Army knife.
And pulls open the knife part of it, the actual knife blade. And then, he just kind of like hurls the knife.
He just throws it at throws it at the guy. And of course it sticks.
It looks like he's throwing it at him like he's going to stick the guy with it, but of course, it perfectly.
He's trying to just give the guy the knife so that he can cut himself free, and in fact, he says, "Here, cut yourself free," or something like this. But just
give yourself some room, or something like that. Yeah, and he throws that knife up there, and it perfectly sticks into the bamboo, and it's like, I don't know if that would happen, but
but yeah, it just shows you though how apparently skillful MacGyver is, because not only is he smart and he's a scientist and he knows all this stuff, but he also can throw a mean Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. And it's funny, his attachment to the knife too, because you hear him even when he's leaving. He's like, "I want that knife back."
Yeah,
you know?
I just had that in my notes. Yeah, again, that nice breezy tone of this. I want that back.
Yeah,
you know, there's nothing serious going on here. I mean, it's totally serious. If you were actually in that situation yourself, you'd be crapping your pants. But not MacGyver.
That would be the last thing on your mind, is getting your knife back. You want to survive the day. You want to get the hell out of there. But he's just like, I want that knife back. I don't want to lose my knife. I don't care about my life. But
now, the first time we see what really is the show's trademark, the shtick of the show, you hear the music. All of a sudden, the music kicks in, and it's a riff on the theme song. It's like this kind of suspense instrumental music comes on, and that's because he's snuck himself into this tent, and now he's got a countdown. This rocket, I guess it's going to either take off when the countdown happens, or it's going to explode. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, something's going to happen.
But something not good is going to happen.
He pulls out this little, it looks like almost like a weird hard drive or something, like some kind of component to the inside of this rocket.
And that starts it, right?
And it kickstarts this timer that I think is like 60 seconds long. So he's got about a minute to figure out what the heck he's going to do. And
so what does MacGyver need? Well, it looked like a paperclip to me.
Yeah, I think it was a paperclip. Well, before that, he pulls out this little it looks like a little wire cutter set or whatever, and he clips a wire because he's like, oh, maybe this will deactivate the timer, and he clips the wire and it doesn't do anything, and then he's like sitting there thinking, and it gets down to about 10 seconds, and he's still thinking about it, and then you see him pull out, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a paperclip, and he unfolds it and bends it into this weird pattern, kind of like how that little drive component or whatever it was in the rocket, and then he slides it in there, and of course it stops right at 1 second, just in the nick of time, and sets the timer back. It just kind of freezes the timer.
I'm thinking, MacGyver, you probably could have done it with like 6 or 7 seconds to spare, but no, he's gonna make it exciting. He's gonna wait till there's 1 second left, because that's when it stopped, was that 1 second.
Literally 1 second. Yeah. that dramatized thing in TV shows there, the very last second.
But yeah, and that was the thing, and so that was, I think that's the first MacGyverism.
Yeah, that was the first one we saw in the episode, actually.
And if I remember right, I think that's what the term MacGyverism means. Where you're just taking these everyday objects or whatever and using them for something else to get the job done, because that's what MacGyver, that's what he's known for. Which kind of reminded me too of TV shows like The A-Team, which came out, I don't know, a year and a half before that. The A-Team, I remember watching that as a kid too, and as a team, they kind of did stuff like that. Every episode, they would build some weird thing out of whatever they had available to them, and
they all had their own individual skill sets in certain areas.
Yeah, exactly.
So they would,
exactly.
Piece things together.
They were like
and make a plan.
Yeah, they were like a team MacGyver, not by themselves. But anyway, there was definitely some similarities to that. It seemed like there was one more I thought of when I was watching that, but now I can't even remember it. But what I was thinking of. Moving on through this opening gambit, and we're spending some time on this because it is an important part of the show, the fact that they just want to have some action. Again, it's just like the bulk of the older James Bond movies, where they just had this 5 to 10 minute opening, exciting little action adventure episode that had absolutely nothing to do with the plot of the main movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because this opening scene, like you said, it has nothing to do with the actual episode, but it really sets the tone for how the whole series is going to be. Because you see him, the way he acts, he's all calm, cool, and collect about everything. And then you see him doing things like with the paperclip, stopping the rocket. And the part right after that, the next MacGyverism, which we'll probably talk about here in a minute. But you kind of see all these tones being set out, and it just shows you what you're in for the series. And a lot of people probably didn't know if it was just going to be this episode or how the series was going to go based upon that, but it really is just that, like he's piecing all this stuff together, and he makes it work.
It's amazing. And that's what made the show entertaining. That the difference between MacGyver and, say, just somebody who's going in saving people and kicking butt on bad guys, is that MacGyver's special thing was his brains. He's using brains instead of violence.
Yeah, instead of brawn. It's like we were talking about, he's almost like a Rambo, but Rambo would be more like just...
Rambo's going to take the machine gun and just mow everybody down.
That mountain, take the first guy out, grab his machine gun, and just gun everybody down in the village.
Now, something interesting about that is that throughout the entire run of the series, MacGyver stated many times his opposition to using guns because of a childhood event. I don't remember what that is. I don't remember which episode that is. But, however, in this pilot episode, he does, in fact, fire a gun, an AK-47. Not exactly how you'd normally fire an AK-47. Right. But unless I'm remembering it wrong, because the notes I have says that he then quickly hands it to the pilot he's rescuing to provide cover fire. So did he fire off a couple rounds? I don't even remember. Maybe he did.
I don't remember
but
either.
This aspect of the character was probably added after the pilot, as he makes no mention of his distaste for guns in this first episode. So that's the thing. He does at least handle a gun. And even though we just watched it, I can't remember if he actually took some shots. He actually takes... He did take the gun and kind of jerry-rig it up with a stick and a string to make for a diversion.
Yeah, this is that second MacGyverism I was talking about. Was he sets this AK-47 barrel down into the dirt, leaning up against like a tree or something, some kind of bush or whatever, and he's got a string attached to it with a stick right on the trigger, and he's got some kind of like pulley system or something, and he sets a matchbook in the middle of it, and he sets one of the matches off, so it's kind of like a timer. He built himself a little timer, so after a little while that matchbook slowly burns up, it burns the string and releases that pulley system, and the stick goes down on the gun and starts firing it into the dirt, which was his way of setting up a distraction to get this guy in the cage out. They're going to escape while this distraction is going on, because all these soldiers think that somebody's firing off rounds over on the side of the village, or their camp.
One thing that you think of when you see MacGyver doing his MacGyverisms and putting this crap together is it makes you wonder, is this stuff real? From what I read, a lot of this stuff was based on science, real science. The MacGyverisms shown in the series, according to some of the stuff I read, are all based on scientific fact, but not all of the steps needed to create the experiments were always shown on the show. And they say that this was done to prevent children who are watching the show, like me back in the 80s, from duplicating the experiments themselves and possibly getting injured. Yeah. So in other words, perhaps a lot of these things that we saw him do, were actually possible to do, but they didn't completely break it down and show you every single little step.
They didn't want anybody trying to recreate these things.
Because they didn't want kids getting hurt trying to do that, A, and B, they probably didn't want to get sued either.
Yeah, that too.
After that. Because, especially in today's world, that stuff's everywhere,
Yep. Once a kid gets hurt, and then, he saw it on
a movie,
TV show,
saw it on a video game.
So we're going to sue the production company into the ground,
Oh, yeah, exactly. So there was that aspect of it. So, MacGyver. We're about to get to the opening credits finally of this opening episode, and the last thing he does, of course, is earlier on he had taken a flare gun out of the cockpit of this crashed plane that was flown by the guy that he just rescued, and so now the only place they can go is back down this frickin' rock mountain that he just climbed up. Only he's got this guy with him. So as they're being shot at, he actually straps on his parachute backpack, and then it's like he takes a rock and smashes the barrel of the flare gun.
He's smashing the end of the flare gun down so that the flare won't actually come out of it, but it still fires.
And the pilot he's rescuing is like, "What are you doing? What do you do?" What do you say? I'm making a rocket launcher.
I'm making some kind of like propulsion rocket or something like that. Yeah.
And all he does it for is, and I thought it was funny because you mentioned as we were watching it, you go, why didn't they just, because basically he hugs the guy, he gives the guy like a bear hug, and then shoots the gun, which has now been hammered shut on the barrel, which apparently is supposed to propel them backwards off this rock cliff. And of course we're thinking, why didn't they just jump off, And the only thing I could think of is that maybe they needed to get further out or something. But sometimes I see something like that and I think to myself, does that really work? Is that really based on scientific fact? You know, because I'm thinking if you actually fire that thing might explode in your hand.
Yeah, I was
going to
say that. Yeah, it probably would. You know, I wouldn't test it myself, to be honest.
Yeah, that would be fairly dangerous. So that's it. That's how it goes. So they fall off this rock thing. Excuse me. They are launched.
They're launched a foot and a half away from the rock.
An extra 19 inches than what they would have gotten had they just jumped. And so leave it to MacGyver. But and then you see the parachute. They open the parachute, and I thought it was funny because the bad guys, these militants, they just stop shooting altogether. They're like, you know what? Screw this. We're not shooting at this guy because he has foiled us, and it's been so impressive the way he's foiled us. We're not even going to shoot at his parachute as he's falling, as he's going down the into the valley.
You know, exactly. They're shooting at him to kill him, so obviously they want to kill him. And the easiest way to do that is if he opens up a parachute, just put a couple holes in it, and that thing's going to tear, and they're going to fall. You know, so it's like after that parachute opens, they're just like, hey, yeah, you got away.
So, and that brings us to the opening credits, and then all of a sudden, bing, 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 it's MacGyver. That's what we're watching. Oh, okay. And that familiar theme song that a lot of you have probably listened to, and if you haven't for a while, you probably will remember it if you watch it again. And just pretty typical, just shows a lot of action adventure of MacGyver blowing shit up, you know, and escaping things and making little gadgets and stuff, and that just gets us into the episode, and that's the start. And the first thing that we see is when I assume we came back from a commercial break after the opening credits, is MacGyver's home. Yes. And it's the Griffiths Observatory apparently is where MacGyver lives right now. Okay.
It's just, a massive thing. Like, even when just at a glance when it popped up, I was like, he lives at the White House? Like, it's just this giant, you know,
it kind of,
facility. You know?
It's
like,
a space.
The heck?
It's like a space observatory that was built, gosh, like in the 20s, and they've built onto it. And it's somewhere in Los Angeles, I think. I read about it a long time ago. But if you don't know what that is, that just looks like MacGyver's a rich dude who lives in this high-tech frickin' space home.
Yeah.
It looks like something that...
futuristic mansion.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it looks like. And is early in the first season, it was implied that MacGyver lived in the Griffiths Observatory. But later in the season, it's obvious he lives above the Coney Island stand in Venice Beach. So at some point, you know, again, it's just more of a interesting trivia. They just decided that, okay, that's probably more practical to have him actually living somewhere else. But I don't know if it was ever explained why he was living at the observatory. For a while at least, or maybe he was just staying there. He was laying low, you know. He's got to get away from all these government conspiracy, you know, these people coming after him. Maybe. Well, as far as I know,
so he goes to the Griffith Observatory.
The observatory, though, as far as I know, is probably a pretty high trafficked destination for people visiting the area. So in real life, I'm not sure he's laying low if he's living there. But but for fiction, like when I was younger and I watched that, I didn't know what the hell that was. I just looked like, oh shit, MacGyver lives in an awesome freaking place.
Playing basketball with this little kid, you know, whatever.
So yeah, and this little kid, interestingly enough, he's only in the very first scene of the episode, not counting the opening gambit, and the last scene of the episode. So it's just kind of those little scenes that establish that this is who MacGyver is outside of the adventure that he's about to take the episode on. So this kid, I was just curious to know who it was. He's played by Shavar Ross, and I'm not sure I'm saying his name right, Shavar, which would be about the fourth name I've effed up so far in this podcast already. But
Shavar Ross?
Shavar Ross. He plays Mac's little brother. I think it was like one of those Big Brother, Little Brother program, you know, where you take somebody in and kind of sponsor and just, you know, somebody whose parents died or something like that.
Yeah, like a troubled teen or
I think
a young kid or whatever, you know.
I think that's what he is. Well, Shavar Ross, this is the actual actor's name, and he looks like he was maybe about 10 years old.
Yeah, something like that.
He's known for his recurring television roles as Dudley on the NBC sitcom Different Strokes. back in the 80s, and as Weasel in the ABC sitcom Family Matters, which would have happened in the 90s. Remember Family Matters with like Urkel and all those guys?
Urkel and Carl Winslow. And
yeah. So he also appeared in Benson as part of a Big Brother, Little Brother type charity imposition that the governor made the employees participate in season 2. And I thought that bit of information was interesting because he's kind of playing a similar character in this MacGyver episode, playing the Big Brother, Little Brother thing. That only MacGyver is like the sponsor.
Yeah, they never mention anything about it in particular, but that's definitely the feel you get when you see this, like the opening and the ending scene with him in it. Yeah,
and so he had a recurring role as TC's son on the detective drama Magnum PI. Another recurring role was on films, such as the 5th installment of the Friday the 13th movie series, A New Beginning in 1985. So he's been around, but you don't really know who he is. In 1996, after he completed 4 years of Bible school at the Ministry Training Institute, and he founded the Alive Church, a non-denominational Christian church in Los Angeles, and he was its pastor for 4 years. So anyhow, just a bunch of trivial shit, but I thought it was interesting because I always wonder when I see these little bit part actors sometimes, especially the young ones, because what I'm usually curious about is it somebody I don't recognize? Like, is that Denzel Washington?
Yeah,
and you just don't know what it is?
Somebody that moved on to do something great and you don't realize it right away, or is it somebody that just is doing minor parts here and there, still in television, or did they just kind of fall off?
Yeah, it makes you. And so I'm always curious as to what they did. So according to what little research I did, it says he's still active in acting and stuff, but it looks like he's doing a lot of other stuff not related to acting as well. But anyhow, so he's in just a couple of scenes, so not a big deal at all. But I find that stuff interesting. And so now we know where MacGyver lives. We know that he's just a good guy. He's taking care of he's being big brother to somebody. Some of the credits roll up, and I told you about the director.
Yeah, this is.
And you were
right.
I probably made you a little curious about Alan Smithy. And
yeah, because I've never heard of him. You actually talked about this before we even started the episode. You're like, have you heard of this director? And I was like, no.
Well, if you were a little bit of a film buff, or at least I like to read up on film history and stuff, and I was like, Alan Smithy, boy, I know that name. This is a film/movies thing. I didn't really know that it also made its way to TV and episodic television, but it did. And Alan Smithy is not really a real person. It's a pseudonym.
Like a Mark Twain or whatever?
It's a pseudonym. Yeah, it's a pseudonym used by film directors who wish to disown a project. It was coined in 1968 and formally discontinued in 2000, but it was used by Directors Guild of America directors when a director dissatisfied with the final product of his movie, his or her movie, and they had to prove to the satisfaction of a panel that the Directors Guild would put together that he or she wasn't able to exercise creative control over the film. The director was also required by Guild rules not to discuss the circumstances leading to the move or even to acknowledge being the actual director. So I found that interesting, meaning that whoever directed the pilot episode of MacGyver was so dissatisfied and didn't like it so much that they didn't even want their freaking name on it.
Yeah, they didn't want to put their name on it, and it was actually a great episode.
Yeah, I thought there's nothing wrong with it. It's MacGyver. It's a TV.
Exactly. Maybe it didn't go exactly the way they had planned or whatever, but it still turned out perfect. And I mean, and it wasn't even, that the plot didn't make sense for the first episode because it made a lot of sense. And it's not that, the production values were terrible. It looked very high quality, high budget, for its time, definitely. Even now, me watching it right now, I could watch that and it looked great to me, It didn't look super cheesy or anything.
I mean, it was
a little bit here and there that kind of looked, a little outdated effects or whatever, but they did great for their time,
It was a director thing, which means despite the good special effects and the good sets and props and everything, that perhaps whoever directed it, just the direction, the producers may have taken the show in a different direction than the director really wanted it to go, and so maybe that caused some sort of friction. And I looked up, I think I actually came across the actual name of the director. I think it was listed somewhere, but I didn't write it down, so I can't remember what it is. So get at us in the comments and let us know who did that. And if you know why, if you know the circumstances as to why they wanted to disown this episode of MacGyver
episode.
Yeah, let us know, because I'm curious to know, and I didn't find it. I didn't look real hard for it. I don't think it's that relevant to just discussing the episode, but it is interesting that the actual director of what we just watched is not even listed on the episode. It's Alan Smithy. And I just thought, oh man, when I saw that, I was like, oh wait, I know that name. That's that deal where they didn't want their name on it.
That's pretty clever, but at the same time, it's like, wow, you know, they really did that. Like, yeah, we'll just make up this name and just slap it on any old thing that we don't care for.
I don't think people outside of Hollywood really would have known that.
No, definitely not.
I wouldn't have if it weren't for things like the internet and things like where you can easily find, and even now today, people who don't care about the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with TV or movies,
they'd never find out.
They probably don't even, you know, those credits go by, they don't even look at them, most people. But yeah, definitely now though, with that information dispersed out there a little bit more, it is really interesting. And it's also interesting that they formally stopped doing that in the year 2000 after doing it starting from 1968, which is what, 32 years that they did that. You know, use the Alan Smithy pseudonym, you know. So yeah, but I just thought that was really interesting.
You know, if we ever do some kind of production, like some kind of film or something, we should just slap that on there as a teaser, you know?
Everything that we do, we should slap that on there, because we should probably disown this podcast should be an Alan Smithy podcast.
That's right. We're changing our domain name to alansmithy.com.
There you go. I wonder if there is a website. We'll have to check that out. So yeah, so here we go. Just getting into the episode, MacGyver's visited by some people who need his help, you know, because who doesn't need MacGyver's help, especially in an episode of MacGyver? And one person that we meet right off, by the way, this is in Bannon, New Mexico, okay, is Barbara Spencer, played by Darlene Flugel, and I honestly don't know how to pronounce
Darlene Flugel.
I've read her name millions of times because she's done a lot of different stuff. And when I first saw her name on the credit list, I was like, oh yeah, I remember her. She plays Barbara Spencer in this episode. She had a main role on the first season of the NBC drama series Crime Story from 1986 and 87. And I remember that show. It starred Dennis Farina. And I need to rewatch it because it's been decades since I've actually watched it. But she also had a recurring role on Wise Guy, and from 90 to 91 was a regular cast member in the final season of Hunter. And that's where I really remember her, I think, because she took over the role from, can't remember the actress's name, but Hunter's first partner in that. It was a cop show. Hunter was this cop detective guy. And so she was like she took over that co-starring role in the final season. Yeah, and I think I was in high school, and that's when my grandpa, he loved Hunter, and so I remember knowing more about Hunter than I probably needed to, you know, that sort of thing. She taught acting as a professor at the University of Central Florida from 02 to 07. And according to what I found, she was born in 1956, but her years active for acting, 1978 to 1996, which I found interesting because most of the actors that you see doing it at this level, professional level, network TV and motion picture level, most of them continue to act until they die, you know, well into their retirement years and stuff. But she was
even in picking up, like, you know, if they get out of their main character base, they pick up minor roles here and there and stuff. They just continue to do it until they can't anymore, really.
Yeah, so she was like 40 years old and decided to stop acting. There is a credit on like a short film in the late 2000s, but that was the only credit after 96 listed on her, you know, like her Internet Movie Database listing. But she was teaching acting from 02 to 07, so maybe that's just where her love is now, doing that stuff. And but anyhow, she plays a main character in this opening episode, and we first see her when we're introduced to this, what looks like it's some sort of scientific lab out in the middle of the desert in Bannon, New Mexico, I believe the thing across the screen said the tag. and I think they called it Centrix, something like that. Some high-tech security thing where they're doing all kinds of science experiments and stuff. And she's got these two old dudes down in one of these major rooms, Carl and Sydney. They're talking about some important stuff. But first they got to play chess. They got to play a quick round of chess.
It's like a mind game.
Yeah, and so that just leads us to basically the main turning point of the episode. At some point while they're down there in this bunker almost looking thing, you eventually see a close-up of the clock, and you hear that music again. And then it shows a close-up of a explosive, and so there's a bomb. Then the bomb goes off, and I thought that was, especially for TV in 1985, I thought that was a pretty well-staged explosion.
Yeah, it actually looked fantastic. Like, it didn't look too cheesy or anything. It looked like a normal, like, everyday, nowadays Hollywood film explosion. Like, when you think of a big explosion going off in the background or something, that's basically what it looked like. You see parts of the set being destroyed, people flying around, and it looks like a realistic, like, fireball explosion.
There was a ton of shots. I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't just like one room and they shook the camera a little bit and pushed over some stuff, to make it look like. I mean, there was stuff blowing up. There was debris flying everywhere. There was like concrete flying everywhere, and it showed different places of different rooms that made this place look like this massive underground scientific research facility that it was portrayed to be.
Yeah, it was just, everything was exploding everywhere. And like they talked about later, it was in the episode they explained that it was all the labs in this place that were all blowing up. So it wasn't just like one bomb as far as I know.
They didn't quite. I don't think they knew. Well, of course, once one goes off, it probably set off some other stuff because there's so much shit that can explode.
Too much, but yeah, it was like, I guess there were several different labs that aren't connected together, but they all blew up about the same time. So that was explained a little later, and then we find out why later on after that. But
so Olaf Pooley and Paul Stewart, those were the two actors playing those old mofos. Playing chess when the bomb goes off, and that brings us to the bomb's gone off, and so there's shit going down. So obviously we need somebody to save the day. Any guesses on who that might be? Who do we need to save the day?
Superman.
But no, this is real life.
No, okay. Yeah, this is real life with MacGyver.
Okay,
you can fix a rocket with a paperclip.
So, right, exactly. You make a rocket out of a paperclip.
That's right.
As long as you
also off a cliff with a flare gun.
As long as you also have a candy wrapper and a stick of gum.
Yeah.
So Ed Gantner.
Is that how you say it?
Is that his name? Gant? MacGyver calls him Gant. He's the guy who flies in the helicopter to go get MacGyver after all this shit goes down.
That's right, yeah, when he shows up at the observatory.
So what's interesting about this, and get at us in the comments on this one, because this is one I'm curious about. Michael Lerner is the actor. He plays Gantner. And Michael Lerner, he's actually the only other person listed in the opening credits, at least in this episode. And so I'm assuming he must be like MacGyver's boss, or that kind of boss figure, some
sort of head figure.
Yeah, the guy who gives MacGyver his missions, basically. What's interesting is he gets MacGyver to come to this place where all this explosion has happened, where all this destruction is going down, and MacGyver meets Dana Elcar, that's actually the actor's name, Coulson. They call him Coulson. It's played by Dana Elcar. Well, anybody who watched MacGyver back in the 80s and the early 90s knows that Dana Elcar actually was the actor who wound up playing what looks like the role that this Michael Lerner is playing. He ends up playing
the boss.
MacGyver's boss.
Yeah.
And so from what I read on there, and again, get at us, because I'm curious to know more about this. In the 11th episode of the first season is when this actor returns as a different character as MacGyver's boss. And then something happened where Richard Dean Anderson, who plays MacGyver, wound up really liking working with Dana Elcar so much that he asked the producers, why don't you bring him back and give him a role? So he ended up in that role of of MacGyver's boss. And I'm struggling to remember his character's name when he came back. But he appeared as a guest star in the pilot episode, according to my notes. And Richard Dean Anderson recommended him to the producers to join the show, playing a different character. Elcar joined the series in the 11th episode as Pete Thornton. That was the name. I know I had it in here somewhere. So Elcar, he comes back 11 episodes after this one, only playing a completely different character. I guess they just assumed nobody would remember the minor character in the pilot episode. But what I want to know is, did Michael Lerner stay on the show at that point? And if not, why was he booted off the show, or was he and Elcar both on the show after the 11th episode? I didn't look into it. I don't know. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting, because it seems like, yeah, if they brought him back, they wouldn't need, not Elcar, but the other one.
Michael Lerner playing Gant.
Yeah.
Gant.
So they wouldn't need him anymore, right? So did they give him another kind of, like,
yeah, and I just don't remember
job, or did they just like, yep, sorry, you're out of here?
Yeah, because we didn't watch any episodes after this one, so so we don't know how long he stays on the show. But he's actually credited in the opening theme, the opening credits. He's the only other person other than Richard Dean Anderson credited in the show. So I'm just really curious if he didn't work out for some reason as far as the show goes, and they just
kind of behind the scenes production.
Yeah, and Anderson said, "Hey, I like that guy we had in the pilot. Bring him back. I like working with him."
But yeah, I like this guy. Maybe he could do the role instead.
So yeah, absolutely. So a little behind the scenes stuff, which we're gonna go off on a tangent. Apparently, I want to take a quick second, folks, everybody. Patreon. This is our first episode, but we're planning on doing one every single week. Every Wednesday, a new show uploaded for you to listen, for you to just hang back and check out what we're talking about.
Hump day, drunk day.
That is correct. There you go.
There
I didn't even think of that.
Catchphrase, what?
Hey, that's right. Add that one to the list. And I'm sure we'll think of more as we go, even tonight as we're doing the show. But patreon.com/Drunk TV. We are an independent podcast. We're not owned by a Hollywood studio. We're not owned by some mega conglomerate. We're an independent show doing this on our shoestring budget.
Exactly.
And so it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of, we spend the time to research and set up the websites and set up the streaming platforms and options that we have so that you guys can listen to the show. And what we need is your support. So if you visit us at Patreon, that's Patreon, patreon.com/drunktv, that's a place where you can pledge, you can donate, you can pledge and actually basically be like a sponsor. You can set it up to where just every month that donation is taken right out of your credit card or PayPal account, just like if you were paying a bill. And you set the amount. It can be, you can give us $15 a month if you like the show and want us to keep doing this, or you can give us $1 a month. We can give you a shout out. And we're still working on figuring out what kind of rewards we want to give out for people who do support the show through Patreon. If you want to just support and you want to be anonymous, you can be anonymous too. If you don't want your name out there, but you like our show and you want to be a supporter, you can do it anonymously. It's Patreon, patreon.com/drunktv. Check it out. Become a patron at Patreon and help us out. Help us keep the show on the air because we're enjoying doing it for you.
Exactly.
And with all this alcohol we drink just to do this show, we definitely need to keep the budget up in the stratosphere.
Exactly. We need to afford more booze and actually better equipment to record this stuff with. Our setup right now isn't bad, but it's definitely not professional by any means.
And that's actually, once we get to a certain point, that's first on the list. Our first goal is to buy some headsets and actually get a better setup. And as we move along, we'd like to just work our way up to getting a full-fledged studio for doing these shows eventually. And so, yeah, thank you. Pilot episode of MacGyver kind of reminds me of the Towering Inferno a little bit. And for those of you who never saw that, it's a 70s show. It's one of those like disaster, Irwin Allen disaster movies, kind of like Airport, The Poseidon Adventure, and a lot of Earthquake, and a lot of other movies in different eras too.
Just kind of disaster movies.
Yeah, and that's really what this episode is. MacGyver is basically going through this blown up building. It looks like, it reminds me of like if NASA blew up, or was just kind of in shambles about to blow up, and you know, there's some acid leaking out of this big thing, this big water tower looking thing. Inside this thing actually cracks and there's acid coming out. There's all kinds of crap going down that MacGyver has to deal with.
Yeah, this acid that leaks out, it actually reminded me, like, it looks like some kind of like purple maple syrup or something that's leaking out of the side of this container, you know? But I mean, it doesn't look really bad though. I mean,
I want to taste that.
Yeah, exactly. But to be honest, yeah, it doesn't look that bad, but it just like it looks a little like, oh, okay, this is kind of crazy. Like this giant vat of acid, you know, gets a crack in it and starts leaking out this like thick crap, you know.
Yeah, and really the theme, it's like the whole episode is themed on that, the idea of racing the clock. And we saw this in the opening gambit when he's defusing that rocket, and we see it now because now he has to save these people before, I think they're going to flush the building out first. He's racing the clock because they're going to like send a bunch of acid through the building, I think, just to kind of destroy it. But on top of that, they're going to send another rocket to blow up the underground part, because all the crap that could, I guess, get into the atmosphere if the building blows up, maybe, is going to be bad news. And so the whole episode is MacGyver having to get all this stuff done while he's racing the clock so that people don't die.
Yeah, exactly. He's trying to race through here and rescue as many people as he can out of the building and handle it kind of calmly without having to basically nuke the building and destroy everything just to protect, you know, the outside world, like society outside. So he's racing against the clock and putting himself at risk to try to get out all these survivors if he can and stop this himself. But if he can't do it, their backup plan is to just basically
blow it up, get rid of it,
the building, and blow everything up. Yep.
And somehow that's going to neutralize everything, apparently, exactly. and everything will be safe if we blow it all up. But the problem is, of course, lives will be taken, collateral damage. So MacGyver's about to take off through this maze of stuff, and of course, I just wanted to point out some of the MacGyvers as we go along here. In his first one, and it's kind of funny because they kind of beat you over the head with it a little bit, but what they do is, MacGyver, spare a cigarette? Yeah. He asks Coulson, Dana Elcar, for a cigarette, you know, and well, you know, and he hands him the pack, and he takes the whole pack, throws the whole pack in his knapsack, and you wonder why, and he's like, yeah, but go ahead, take the whole pack, will you? You know, and everybody but MacGyver is too stupid to realize that he's actually doing it for a reason, you know. And one of the characters tells MacGyver that it's going to take a lot more than you have in that knapsack to be able to pull this off, and MacGyver answers, "It's not for what I take, but for what I find along the way."
That's right.
And that really narrows down the focus of kind of the trademark of the show, which is MacGyver using everyday items.
Yeah, he's
to solve problems.
He's very in the moment, like situational. You know, he's very good at picking out things in the environment, and they actually explain that, or like play on that a little more later in the episode when they're in the lab and he's sitting there trying to think about how to blow through this wall, and he asks the one character, I can't remember her name right now, but anyways, he asked her, you know, what kind of lab is
Barbara
this?
Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer, yeah. He asked her, what kind of lab is this? And she's like, a metallurgy, you know, lab or whatever. And so he's like, metallurgy, and he's sitting there thinking, and it's like he's trying to figure out what would be in that sort of lab and then what he can use to blow open a wall with that stuff. So it's like he's very situational. He knows a lot about different you know, elements and aspects of things, and he can just fix problems with whatever's around him.
Right, absolutely.
Work, you know?
And they're gonna make sure you know this by episodes in, because that's what. Oh man, you got to tune in to see what MacGyver's gonna do. You know, because that's I guess it was partly what was exciting about watching the A-Team too. You know, you always wondered what that cool thing, majigger, they were going to create at the end of each episode to get out of their jam. So MacGyver's off on his, just to continue that little part of the episode, he has to get through these blue lasers. It's the security system.
Yeah, it's some kind of like air duct, and there's a shaft thing in the side of this building, and he's got to crawl through it, which I mentioned earlier is when he's sitting there crawling through it, whistling, you know, because he's very calm about the situation. And he gets to the end, and there's a grate, and he kicks it through. It flies through into these lasers and basically like sparks and fries. And so, like,
your laser's working.
yeah.
I think he tells him.
Yeah,
He's on a two-way radio back with the people in the control room. So that's how MacGyver's actually. This is way before cell phones, or at least normal people didn't have cell phones in '85. So he's actually got like a lapel mic on.
Yeah, it's like a little. It's almost like a walkie-talkie type deal with a little mic.
Like what police probably had.
Yeah. And he kicks that through. It fries through this laser, and he gets a glimpse of the laser system itself.
So you can see it down there, and it's so like this jagged pattern of laser, but he can't really see it. So maybe it's time for a smoke, he says.
Yep. So he pulls out that. First he pulls out just one cigarette and he lights it up, and you can see him sitting there puffing on it. And clearly he's not a smoker, because immediately after the first puff or two, he starts like kind of coughing and hacking. He's just doing it to get smoke out. So you realize, you're wondering what he's doing with this. And then he pulls out a couple more cigarettes and he puts them all in his mouth, and he's lighting them up and puffing into the room. And as the smoke starts to fill the room and billow out, it becomes clear that it's showing all these lasers. The light is refracting around with these lasers, so that you can see them. And
I don't take MacGyver as a smoker either.
Yeah.
I don't think regularly he's a smoker.
No. But you see, and it kind of shows that it's just one. There's one point in the wall that's shooting this one laser out, and there's a bunch of little mirrors all over the room that the lasers are bouncing off of. So they're in this crazy hexed pattern, but it's actually just one laser, and it just looks crazy because all these mirrors are bouncing them off of each other, and it's making this crazy grid kind of. And this laser obviously is basically, it's like a laser you would see in an action movie, like a laser beam. It's gonna burn you and fry you if you touch it.
Right.
So that's when he pulls out his binoculars.
He's so calm and collected. It's hilarious. Anybody would be sweating at least, going through this. Not MacGyver. And in fact, he's almost just kind of smart ass about it. And what I like too is just to drive home the point that MacGyver is this cool cat, calm and collected, and knows what the hell he's doing with all this scientific stuff. You hear them coming over the little walkie-talkie thing. Is he really taking the time for a smoke?
Yeah, that's right.
What is he doing? What does he mean he's taking a smoke? What is he doing out there?
Yeah.
But he's so calm and collected. It's hilarious.
I love the part right after that too. What I said with him pulling out the binoculars. Another thing that he shows how calm and collected he is he pulls out the binoculars, and he, even before he does anything, he says, "Well, you guys got to remind me to get a new pair of binoculars." And he smashes the eyepiece or whatever, the little glass eyepiece out of the front of the binoculars, and he pulls that up, and everybody's freaking out, like, "What the heck are you talking about? Why would you be talking about binoculars at a time like this?" Kind of thing. And you see him leaning into the room with that little
binoculars. What?
Eyepiece.
What's he doing?
Yeah, what's he doing? Yeah. And what was the quote he says? Something about like, "You ever seen a scorpion sting itself to death?" Or
That's exactly
like,
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he takes that little glass kind of mirror or whatever from the binocular, the little glass piece, and reflects the laser back into that central point where it came from, the little origin point, and it ends up burning and frying it out. So it completely disables that whole.
So he uses the laser against itself to destroy the laser, so he can actually navigate through this, whatever it was. What is that?
It's some kind of like
duct.
It's like a shaft, like an elevator shaft type looking thing. I mean, there's no elevator or anything, but it's like some kind of
I don't see
air duct shaft.
I don't see how he actually got down it, because as soon as he blew that up, it faded to commercial.
Yeah, and then the next thing we see or whatever is like this hole in the ceiling, and you see like dirt fall.
So yeah, so during the commercial break, he actually navigated through some other stuff that we didn't see. So so yeah, that was the easy part to get through there.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll just cut out a little bit with a little commercial break.
So yeah, which is typical. But everybody, I mean, so we're in awe. We're in awe of. The suits are in awe. Those guys back in the control room. What is he doing? But he's making his way through. Cigarette smoking and using binoculars. What in the world? And it's just hilarious, though.
These guys that have never heard of improvisation.
Right, exactly. Okay. So moving on, he makes his way to a place. He kind of gets stopped. He's roadblocked, and there's a bunch of debris in front of him. But before he moves on, he hears somebody tapping. Ting, ting. And he's like, "Oh, crap, we got people here." And so the next MacGyverism, he takes.
There's here's this tapping or whatever through this, like, there's like debris and there's like giant metal girder that's in front of him, and he obviously can't move this giant girder by himself.
Right.
So he's got to think of a way. How am I going to get this girder out of the way here? So what was it? The conversation he has with
he's talking with a guy, and the guy takes a drink of,
and you just hear like a,
what was that? Yeah, you hear the slurp. And MacGyver, what was that? What was that noise? I just took a drink of water.
Yeah, I just took a sip of my water.
Water.
Oh yeah, it's just like sparks this idea in his head.
So that gets him. He goes and finds a fire hose, cuts it, ties it off, and then sticks it under this girder that has fallen and is blocking the path. And he needs to if he could just raise it up 3 or 4 inches or something like that, he could swing it to the side and get through there. And so by sticking this hose underneath it, turning on the water, the pressure from the hose bulging up moves this girder just enough so that he can push it through.
Exactly.
Thanks, but of course, apparently he would not have thought of this had he not heard the slurp of the guy drinking water back in the control room.
A cup of water, like he's got like a coffee mug of water. Like they don't have like plastic cups and a little water fountain, you know, like you would in an office. He's got a mug, and he went and filled that up at the sink somewhere.
Well, yeah, but it's like I said, what if he would have said he was drinking coffee? Would MacGyver have thought as quickly?
Yeah, exactly.
Drink a coffee, MacGyver.
Or a more reasonable thing, just sorry, that was me taking a drink.
I did read somewhere on a different site somewhere, I don't remember where, but I did read that particular MacGyverism apparently was one that wouldn't work in real life. Apparently I don't know what's true. I mean, I'm reading this stuff on the internet.
Yeah, some of them wouldn't work.
This particular one, even though I've read that everything's based on scientific fact, so they try to be really true when they come up with this stuff. But this one, they said that that hose would not have been able to have that much pressure, enough pressure to actually do that. And like you said, after he busts through, it's kind of like, well, what about that hose? He just left it on. He's going to explode at some point.
Yeah, I said something about that. I'm like, okay, it's a good thing he just left that hose on, because I mean, all that water rushing through, eventually it's going to burst somewhere.
And by the way, I love when he like pushes through, yes. And he just kind of falls through, and there's like all these huge pieces of concrete falling all over him. But he just kind of pops up, you know, and all these people in there on the other side. He asks them, "Is anybody hurt?" "Oh, yeah. We're okay." But forget him who just fell through with a bunch of rocks, and I mean, obviously they're like styrofoam, you know, fake rocks or something. But yeah, if it was real life, though, it's like, holy crap, MacGyver, you probably just like lost a finger.
His body, and yeah, and it's like they're the 2 or 3 times the size of his head, these giant concrete chunks or whatever, and he falls through, and they're like rolling over the top of him, and then he just lays on the ground there. Is everybody okay? Like, that's the first thing he thinks about when he gets in. Like, forget about him, you know, he's fine. But yeah, he's just
well, and that's when MacGyver meets Barbara Spencer. She's one of the ones stuck in there with those people, and so this is the first time that they meet up. Barbara Spencer, played by Darlene Flugel, who we talked about earlier, and
Flugel.
The interesting part here too is that now they kind of plant the seeds of the mystery, like, because somebody asks, I think maybe MacGyver, what caused the explosion? And, you know, she didn't know. And so the mystery's kind of on, like, how did these explosions happen? I don't know. All these buildings or labs are independent of each other, and a series of explosions must have happened, and, you know, all this stuff. So the episode is like I said, it's like a towering inferno type of thing. So there's not a lot of plot to go through. It's more just watching him navigate this maze of shit, trying to bust through this broken down underground building and save everybody before time runs out.
Exactly. It's like he's going from it's almost like a trap room after trap room, you know, like it's like little puzzle rooms, I guess. He goes into an area and there's some sort of obstacle in his way, so he's got to figure this out. And then he breaks through and he's in the next area, so he's got to figure out this little piece. Goes through into the next area, and it's like, you know, room after room after room of just like puzzles that he has to solve is basically most of the episode.
And part of the fun is in this pilot episode, I think they're just showing off his skills. Well, let's throw him into this situation. Let's let MacGyver show off his skills, and we'll pick up viewers who will come back and watch him in some other situation do the same thing.
Yeah, he's solving this many crazy puzzles with odd means in just one episode. Imagine what he's going to do through the series. It's like This is just the opening episode.
So Coulson and Gantner have already kind of shown how they feel about what is this smoking cigarettes. Now it's Barbara Spencer's turn, because she decides she's going to go with MacGyver. She's going to show, I know where it's at. I will take you there. And so MacGyver apparently can't tell her that she needs to go with the others, because MacGyver needs a sidekick, especially a very attractive female one for the rest of the episode. That's just how these shows work, folks. And so the first thing they run into is laying on the ground in one of the halls. A vending machine must have knocked over something, because there's a bunch of candy bars laying on the ground, and he's, oh, chocolate, and she's all, how can you think about candy at a time like this?
Yeah, the typical, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so she kind of picks up where those guys were. So she's questioning, oh, come on.
This lunatic is the one going to be saving us,
Right, exactly.
How did he make it this far?
He does actually, for the first time, he actually does give like an excuse. Hey, we're going to be out here a long time. This will give us some energy. He said something, and I think he did like open one and eat it.
Yeah, he started opening one and started,
which I would have done too, by the way. In fact, by the time he actually needed them later on in the episode, I probably would have eaten them all.
Yeah, same here.
So I would have screwed everybody by eating the chocolate. So,
which is funny that, already you can tell just from this, if you haven't seen the episode, he's using chocolate to solve a major problem later.
MacGyver kissed Barbara, I noted this, 34 minutes into the episode. So the very first kiss of MacGyver. Huh?
I said nerd.
So it took MacGyver 34 minutes into the pilot episode to kiss his first female sidekick, because there's probably a different one in every episode, I'm guessing, if it was like Magnum PI and Knight Rider and every other loner solving a crime TV series of the 80s.
This loner suave man trying to get, solve a crime and get with a woman.
Exactly.
At the same time,
And that's all right. It was just kind of a little peck. It wasn't a big deal. So now we learn there's a missile launch that's going to happen in 30 minutes, okay? And they actually superimpose the clock at the bottom corner of the screen.
There's a time clock that pops up at the bottom. It's a little countdown timer that shows up, and it shows you how much time he has left.
And that reminded me of 24, the
TV
with
series
Kiefer Sutherland, just because, well, I've seen that clock. Oh yeah, 24, but what I also like is like 5 minutes later, it went from like 31 minutes to 6 minutes, so that it wasn't in real time like 24 is. It went really fast, but basically that was.
They couldn't have set the time for like 10 minutes and then 6 minutes later, because then that would have seemed more realistic. But no,
but again,
minutes to.
But again, it was just another place where the episode shows that we're racing the clock. Everything MacGyver is doing in this episode is racing the clock, and he needs to do it quick and fast, or people are going to die.
Exactly. You see the audience probably had the urgency that he feels in that situation when they see the clock is at 30 minutes and then the next scene cuts to 6 minutes. They're like, we're wasting a lot of freaking time here. Like, do something. We have to figure this out. Don't you realize what's going to happen?
And that's where we get to the chocolate thing. So they wind up at that big acid tank where it's cracked and the acid is pouring out. Smarty Pants MacGyver knows somehow that chocolate mixed with whatever kind of acid that was.
It was sulfuric acid, and then it was some kind of like a couple compounds in the chocolate.
If you do this, I like how he explained. Forget just actually jumping up there and doing it. He's going to explain it to all of us first. Yeah. And then the chick jumps on his shoulders and she starts stuffing the chocolate in there, which gums it up. And so it temporarily stops the leak of the acid.
Yeah, he talks about
chocolate candy bars, Hershey bars, it looked like.
Yeah, these like chocolate bars or whatever, I guess. Sulfuric acid and chocolate together, they kind of form this sticky, like gunky substance. It doesn't necessarily like melt it like you think acid would with anything, or chocolate just in general if it's exposed to some sort of heat, but they actually combine together to make some kind of gummy, like chunky mix that kind of hardens up. And so she ends up stuffing all these chocolate bars into the cracks of this leak, and they end up gumming up and stopping the leak temporarily. giving them enough time, I guess, to have a team come down or something, you know, some way to actually make a permanent stop to this.
So at this point, MacGyver, Mac, as they call him.
Yeah.
For sure. So at this point, that brings us to where MacGyver is right in the vicinity of where the two old guys are, where they're trapped. And
yeah, the two older guys that were playing chess earlier that we were talking about that were right in the epicenter of the explosion, one of the explosions that happened.
And MacGyver, he kind of leans over, and right after they put those candy bars into the acid tank to stop the leak, that was right where basically the door was to where those two scientists were trapped. And of course she said, we can't get through there. And so, well, what does that mean? MacGyver has to make a bomb to get through there. And so she's busy finding some materials in one of the little storage lockers there close by. Yeah, but MacGyver leans over and he like smells the plastique residue.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he's like, and he like smells it, and he starts to get suspicious at this point. Like, and it doesn't really reveal anything, but you can tell he's already figured out what's going on in his head, which even us, the audience, don't know what's going on yet. Which just shows that, you know, it's another point to the fact that he's like a level higher than everybody else. You know, it's like he's figured this shit out.
Right. Well, we know because we actually saw the bomb go off at the beginning, but we know that he's the only one that knows.
Yeah.
He doesn't want her to know. And in fact, he even tells her, Barbara, he says, hey, when this hole blows, why don't you do me a favor and just stay in here?
That's what I mean.
And don't go through the...
Yeah, he tells
why?
her to stay
just
back
call it
or
whatever he says, men's tuition or intuition or something like
some
that.
Kind of
male intuition.
Or, whatever he said. Like, I've got a hunch or whatever. But anyways, yeah, like... But that shows to me that he's already figured it out beyond what the audience knows, because all we know is a bomb went off, which he figured that out, and we know that, but he's already got some suspicion. Like, he tells her to hang back, so he knows something that we don't, because it's like, why is he asking her to hang back? Because we should know that if we're on the same page as him.
Well, what I think you might have missed was he leaned down, and he had this look on his face, inquisitive look, and he kind of put his finger on a piece of the debris and smelled it, and he even said plastique, which told me, at least, unless I'm wrong, that he right at that point he knew that it was a bomb, that actually that's what happened here. Somebody set an actual bomb off. This wasn't an accident.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we got that earlier, but what I was talking about is he's figured it out to the point where he doesn't want her to come into the room because he's suspicious of... Oh,
I see what you mean. He's suspicious of that one of those two guys.
One of these two guys in the next room
that's fair.
It.
That's
and
fair.
So, like, all we know is, it was literally a bomb that went off in the facilities or whatever. So somebody sabotaged it, but nobody knows anything beyond that. But he already at this point...
Yeah, what you're saying is he knew it was a bomb, but he's beaten the audience to knowing that it's actually one of these fuckers.
It's got to be one of these two guys, because we don't realize it yet, but, you know, we learn later... up to the MacGyver level at this point that he knows, is that the only people that could have gotten a bomb into this kind of tight security, you know, facility is one of these two guys, because they have clearance for everything.
And
they're top level.
Why does he know? Because he's MacGyver.
Yeah, he just figured that out.
And of course, before they blew the hole in the wall too, one of your favorite scenes. And this is really this is the pinnacle. This is total MacGyver. This is the MacGyver trademark joke. Barbara says, "Don't tell me you know how to make a bomb out of a stick of chewing gum."
And then he says, "Why? You got any?"
Why, you got some? Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, because so far in this episode, he's done so much crap like that, you know, of course she's going to ask that.
Yeah, you can't even tell if he's joking or not. Like,
well, you know what's funny, though, is that...
Could he really make a bomb out of chewing gum?
Well, yeah, and you know what's really funny is that was always kind of one of the jokes when... Even like today, people joke like that, you know, oh, what, you got to make this out of a stick of gum, like MacGyver or something. And probably people don't even know that the very first episode, an actual character made the same exact freaking joke. Yeah, what, are you going to make a bomb out of a stick of chewing gum? Well, you got some, you know. So they were already making fun of themselves at that point. And in fact, what I thought funny too, there was some liquid metal stuff laying around, which made them able to make this little mini bomb to blow their way through the debris to get to these guys.
It was some kind of sodium sodium alloy or some kind of sodium metal. But
don't you think though? It's almost too, at this point, it's almost too easy for MacGyver. There's almost too much shit lying around for MacGyver. Yeah. I mean, he really could build a helicopter out of the stuff laying around. It's almost like, come on, give me a challenge. There's too much stuff in here.
Yeah, because he asks at one point, he's like, what kind of lab is this? And she says, Barbara says, oh, it's a metallurgy lab or whatever. And he's just like, And he's thinking about it for like a little bit. And then he's just like, oh, you got any sodium alloy or whatever that was? I can't remember. It's something to do with sodium, some kind of sodium metal. And then she like walks over to the cabinet and she's like, oh yeah, right here. Just pulls out a jar of it. And he's just like, okay. You know, it's just like, that was too easy. So then he goes and takes some kind of, it looks like a little bottle or whatever. He takes some of this.
It was very convenient having that stuff on hand. But especially, that would have been real convenient for you or me trying to blow a hole in something. That's way convenient for MacGyver. I don't think, you got to like not even give him those ingredients just like that.
He just takes it and he's like, okay. And he places some metal flakes or whatever in this bottle. And then, like, you know, it's reactive with water or whatever. I think the bottle has water in it already or whatever. So he's just throwing these metal flakes in there. And then he, like, buries it in dirt up against this wall that he's trying to blow through. And what you mentioned before is kind of funny that these are all based on scientific facts, but some of them aren't completely 100% accurate, you know?
Or they leave out steps.
Or, yeah, exactly. And this one right here is one of the ones that I didn't mention before when we were watching the episode, but I knew that one wasn't true because obviously I talked about, you know, sodium reacts with water and it makes an explosion, but it's more of like a puff flame explosion. And I mean, like in larger quantities, it could, like, if you had your hand on it or something, it could blow a hole in your flesh or whatever. But it's not going to be enough.
It looked like a really dangerous thing they were messing with right there.
It looked like a huge explosion, like an actual huge bomb explosion, and it blew through, I would say, like 3 feet, 4 feet of solid concrete straight through. And that would never happen. And I actually, like, I figured that beforehand, but it was confirmed when I watched that TV show Mythbusters, because they did MacGyver myths, and that was one of the ones they did, is they took a giant brick wall that they had made, and they did the exact same thing with, you know, sodium in a water bottle, buried it with dirt right up against the wall or whatever, and tried to blow it away. And it didn't even make it through like a brick wall that's only, you know, half a foot or...
So they just needed more ingredients, right?
So,
make
yeah,
a bigger
it's like,
bomb.
with what he had, it wouldn't have blown through that.
Right.
But if you had stepped the scale up tenfold, maybe it could have done some damage. I still...
And maybe that's part of where the producers are saying, okay, you know what? It actually takes a crap ton of this shit to blow a hole through this wall. We're not going to show that on TV, though. Because we don't want people trying this.
Alan Smithy, is that the name?
The director?
Yeah. So they were just like, all right, this is bullshit.
Yeah, Smithy got pissed. That's why he got pissed. He wanted to show everything. He said, no, we needed a lot more liquid metal or whatever the hell that was.
Why didn't we find a drum of it? Then we could have thrown it up against the wall and then...
Oh, my gosh.
MacGyver couldn't lift that kind of drum. So they were like, well, I guess we'll do a little water bottle and do it because you're a little bitch.
Well, so MacGyver... They do blow the hole. MacGyver does, and he tells her to wait outside or wait in the other room. Of course she doesn't. And so right then we learned, once he blows through, that Carl, one of the old scientists, he pulls a gun. So
yeah, he pulls out a gun and it's like, whoa, what the hell is going on right now?
The other guy, Sidney, he's like, Carl, you lost your mind. And you see MacGyver and Sidney standing there. Carl's holding the gun, and here comes frickin' Barbara through the hole in the wall, and she's like, MacGyver, is everyone all right? You know, and
just goes flying through the
and
hole.
MacGyver, this was hilarious to me because MacGyver's, Spencer, gosh darn it, I told you to wait outside, but just.
It's like,
if it was in real life, or if this was on HBO or something, because it was such an idiot move on her part. What I actually thought was about to come out of his mouth was like, "Damn it, Spencer, you f***ing bitch! I told you to wait outside," because it was such a serious thing. You didn't want her to get hurt, and she was gonna get hurt coming in there. There's some guy holding a gun, and of course we learn in a couple of minutes she does get hurt.
But at the time, like, it's like she doesn't even notice. she hears them talking or whatever, and then like completely ignores MacGyver's advice, and she climbs through the wall. She doesn't even look before she goes through. She just like climbs in and bounces into the room, and she's like, "Is everything all right?" And then she realizes there's a guy standing there with a gun, so she's like, "Oh, this is tense," you know. So it's like you didn't notice this.
Shit!
Like, you couldn't have like. You know, oh, he didn't want me to go through, but I'm just going to take a peek first and, like, look through and see this guy holding a gun. No, she just dives in. Is everybody all right?
Gosh darn it, Spencer. I told you to wait out. You know, in real life, that's not happening. On ABC, where you can't cuss, in 1985 especially, you can only say what you can say of it. But when I watched that, I just thought, oh man, MacGyver's pissed, and he doesn't even get pissed. But the reason why he would have said something more intense in real life is because he kind of cares for this gal. He's already kissed her twice, or maybe once at this point. But he kisses her 3 times total, I think. But yeah, so definitely. And Carl, his master plan was somehow, this old dude, his thing was he was somehow going to get rid of the ozone layer. So this is some heavy stuff.
Yeah, he had figured out, I think what they explained is he had figured out some way to destroy the ozone layer around the Earth. Like the science project they were doing or whatever, he had discovered some way to do that. But he didn't want, like the only people that knew about it was him, Carl, and was it Sydney? They were the only 2 that knew about it. And he didn't want that kind of knowledge to get out because it could be the ultimate like mankind ending biological weapon or whatever. Is basically the sun would fry everybody. It would just basically cook everybody to death if the ozone layer disappeared. So he was trying to save everybody by killing himself and Sydney while simultaneously destroying all the labs in the facility to destroy all the evidence of the research they had done, so nobody else would figure it out, and the 2 people that know how to do it would be dead. So
he raises the gun. Who was he trying to shoot Sydney there at the end when Spencer jumped in the way? Barbara jumped in the way.
Yeah, he was, when they came into the room or whatever, that's when he pulled the gun, is because he realized rescue had come. And he was...
Because he did say no when he heard rescue was out there.
Yeah, I think he was waiting for, like, he knew that they were going to try to cover up the incident with, not necessarily with the rocket, but he knew something was going to happen where they were just going to destroy the facility. So he was kind of biding his time and waiting.
He's trying to hold out, I see.
Waiting for everyone to die, and then as soon as rescue shows up, he panicked, and that's when he pulled out the gun, and he was going to shoot Sydney and probably shoot himself, too, or whatever.
And then Barbara, of course, jumps in front,
and she's like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Well, she just tried to stop, and so of course she gets shot.
Yeah, she ends up making a bold move and diving towards Carl, and she dives in at him, and then he ends up firing off a round into like her gut or her hip or whatever it is.
And I just find this, the only reason I find this funny because it's such a. This is serious stuff. If this were in real life, people getting shot, people getting wounded, just the whole thing, and just the way you just kind of giggle butt through it, because she gets shot and MacGyver leans down. That was dumb, Spencer. Very, very dumb.
He ends up getting the gun from Carl, and then immediately, he just leans down to Spencer, and he's just like,
and I'm like, geez, she just got shot, MacGyver. You're just getting that was dumb. That was really stupid.
A pretty woman, the heroine of this pilot episode or whatever, I guess you could say, like the female co-star, she just gets shot, and like it looks like the gut or the hip or something, like down below there.
She's holding like her right above her hip or something.
Yeah, she gets shot and she drops. He grabs the gun from the guy and gets it away from him, and then he just starts saying that was dumb. Like, you're an idiot. That was dumb. Like, just to iterate on that part from earlier
when she jumped through the hole. She just made a series of really bad decisions in about a 42-second time span.
It's like they're an old married couple already. He's just calling her dumb. She's making dumb decisions to spite him.
And I'm doubting her character return, because this is how these, all the 80s heroes had a different girlfriend every episode. And so, it's usually someone they met in the middle of the episode, they kissed, they made out, and then you never saw them again. So I'm guessing she probably didn't. But if she did, let us know in the comments, because I'd be curious to know if Darlene Flugel came back and played this part again, highly doubtful, or if she came back and played a different role, because that happened a lot in old television too.
what's his name?
Elcar, yeah.
Elcar, yeah.
He came back as a regular, yeah.
Yeah, he played a temporary role here in the pilot, and then he came back in, what, the 11th episode, you said? As a regular
As a regular, and stayed pretty much throughout the rest of the season. He passed away in 2005, but he was, well, we already covered it. He was, Richard Dean Anderson liked him so much, just wanted him to work with him. But we're at the end of the episode. I mean, so they got to get the word back that they found these two jokers and don't launch that rocket. So MacGyver Morse codes through the light system, does Morse code and says, we found them. Don't hit that launch button. Yeah, so don't destroy the building, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because they're
abort launch.
They're sitting down in the bottom of this facility, and what was it? They were talking about it. Him and MacGyver and Spencer were sitting there talking about like, oh, it's too late. We're all gonna die because they've started their counter, defense or whatever. They're blow up the facility. If there was only some way we could signal the outside world, if we had some kind of like, what was it? She said something about like if we only had the power to signal the outside,
right,
or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, you're a genius!" And he runs off, and that's when he finds like the switch controls for all the lights, and he starts doing Morse code on the lights, like flicking them on and off to do Morse code so they can stop the launch. And of course, it happens right in the nick of time. The theme of this episode, I guess.
Yeah, racing the clock.
It got down to like the last 30 seconds when he started Morse coding.
Right.
And then they finally like radio in, and like it must have been like 5 seconds left when they abort launch.
Because they're yelling. It's almost and those guys in the control room, they're cheering, and then they realize, oh shit, we got to tell them to abort launch. Which is funny to me because they're actually in the building too.
Yeah.
which makes me wonder, why are you guys still hanging around? Because they got the front door. They can get out, can't they?
Yeah, they're right at the
they're just like standing there. So
like, all right, let's walk away.
Apparently, once it launches, maybe they got 5 minutes to get out or something. I don't know, but still, it just seemed funny that, oh yeah, crap, let's not die since we saved the day. So there you have it. MacGyver goes back home. He saves the day, and he plays basketball with Shavar Ross again.
Shavar Ross and him are sitting there goofing off and playing basketball, which I have to say, Shavar Ross, like we said before, he's only like, what, 10 years old or something like that?
Throwing down some mad dunks.
Yeah, he looked like a
baller.
Exactly. He was experienced with basketball. It was all in one take too. Like, they're acting and everything, but he's just like kind of throwing the basketball into the hoop over and over with these like ridiculous shots. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, it was kind of a cool little scene that they did together. And it's kind of like homely and humbling or whatever for the whole thing because they're so close together, they're sitting there joking around with each other. So
obviously nice. MacGyver tried to be entertainment for the whole family because, kids would enjoy seeing that. And speaking of kids, one bit of trivia that I found too online is that in the late 80s, according to what I read, 2 teenage boys made a bomb in their garage which went off, killing one of them. The surviving boys said they learned how to make the bomb from an episode of the show. However, the show was quickly exonerated after it was discovered that no such episode existed. But I thought that was interesting, just, that somebody actually, and that just goes back to how they're trying to be a family show, but with adventure and action, which means explosions and
they're trying to be scientific about it, but at the same time they don't want to explain these processes.
Yeah, because there's just idiot kids out there that'll do this stuff, or
exactly.
Maybe that's not the right word. Impressionable, excuse me.
Yes.
And that sort of thing.
They're gonna go out and do exactly. They're gonna mimic what they see on TV. They want to be cool like MacGyver. They're gonna build crazy crap and then end up getting hurt because they're not professionals with this kind of thing. And so, yeah, like these kids built this bomb or whatever, and so the other kid blames it on MacGyver. But if they had done something like that on MacGyver, then that family would have sued the crap out of the production company and the studio and everything like that. They would have made bank off of them, and the show probably would have been shut down right then and there.
So I think the tone for MacGyver is pretty well set, even in this pilot episode. Yeah, the casting changed a little bit and stuff, but like we mentioned at the beginning, this was not an episode where you learned the backstory. This wasn't an origin episode.
Yeah,
this was a typical MacGyver. They threw you in and said, this is MacGyver, this is what he does. This is what you're going to see every week, right? Either before or after Monday Night Football. And it was produced by Winkler Rich Productions. That's Henry Winkler. That's the Fonz.
Yeah.
And that was his production company, which was an arm of Paramount Television at the time, which Paramount is now basically part of the CBS, Viacom and CBS. I think CBS Television owns Paramount, or it was like absorbed into CBS.
Yeah,
and so
merger kind of thing.
Yeah, that, and all that stuff. And interesting thing about that too is that MacGyver was one of 2 Paramount produced network aired shows from the Blue Mountain era. You remember the Paramount logo at the end? It's the Blue Mountain, yeah.
That almost looked like the, what is it, the fucking Coors,
Yeah, exactly, yes, exactly.
The Rockies or whatever. It's pretty much almost the same like logo.
That probably is the mountain that Coors hung out at. But yeah, it was one of 2 Paramount produced shows from that era to last into the Paramount Communications era, which was, the name change and stuff. And so there was only one other show that lasted from that long. And I didn't know this before we started doing this podcast, but you know what that other show was? Mm-hmm. Cheers. And coincidentally, next week, folks, we are going to be doing a podcast on Cheers. That's right. So there you go. You don't even have to wait for the announcement on Facebook or on the website. We're going to tell you right now, because that little piece of trivia ties the 2 shows together, even though that was not even part of anything when we were doing this planning to schedule which podcast we were doing.
When we put the schedule out, we didn't plan anything like this. We were just putting out shows like, oh, we'll just do this and this and this. And yeah, it's kind of nice that it ties in like that. And anybody listening to this podcast this far in is going to be ahead of the game, because they know exactly what next week is going to entail. Anybody that cut out earlier or didn't listen to this isn't going to know, because I don't think we should put this on Facebook that we're going to do Cheers next. Only dedicated fans that are watching our podcast at this point are going to know what next week is going to be about.
Well, I want to finish up just real quick. I just want to talk about thoughts on MacGyver, okay?
Yes.
It ended in 1992. We're talking about the pilot episode, of course, but you got the legacy. First of all, one person we really didn't talk much about is Richard Dean Anderson, the star, okay? Yeah. I think he was perfect for the role of MacGyver. He is MacGyver.
Yeah, he was. He perfectly portrayed that calm, cool, and collect character. And, he's a pretty good-looking guy, so obviously he's not like, some actors are really good at what they do, but like some people are like, hey, he kind of looks weird. He was pretty decent looking, so that also drawed people in, it's like,
He's a good-looking guy. He could, but he I think this sums it up really well, where they say Richard Dean Anderson won the role when the casting director noticed he was unafraid to use his glasses during his audition, which showed a lack of pretension that the creative team wanted in their lead. And that's exactly what I see with Richard Dean Anderson. He's not pretentious. It's not like... it doesn't seem like somebody trying to be an action star. He's kind of a nerd.
Yeah, he doesn't have an ego about him. Exactly. Like, he kind of goes with the flow. And it works perfectly. Like, he fits right into that role, which is exactly what they wanted, is some kind of genius, that could be an action star, which is exactly what he did, is, he wasn't afraid to be a nerd, but he's trying for this kind of action role. So it fits perfectly. He's a genius that could do action.
9 years earlier, he got his start on the soap opera General Hospital in 1976. He played Dr. Jeff Weber. He did a few movies in the 90s. In the late 90s, after MacGyver had ended, he, of course, for years was the star of Stargate SG-1, which aired for a sci-fi show that aired for years, kind of based off the Stargate movie with, I think, Kurt Russell, which was a theatrical movie. And
love Kurt Russell.
There you go. And he was a big fan, Richard Dean Anderson, big fan of The Simpsons. So I think I read somewhere that The Simpsons even parodied MacGyver. Of course, The Simpsons is, after all these years, probably parodied everything. And so that leaves us with the last thing on MacGyver that I want to talk real quick about, which is the legacy. MacGyver is now, you can use the word MacGyver as a verb or a noun. You got MacGyverism. That's a noun because, oh, wow, you just used that little item to do this job. I see it every day on the internet as like life hacks. That reminds me of MacGyvers. It's like MacGyverisms right there. Or you can use it as a verb. What are you going to do with that thing? I'm going to MacGyver it.
Yeah, exactly. You just MacGyvered the crap out of that, And
I read somewhere at the time of this recording that, they're talking about trying to bring it back for a feature film or something. But even prior to that, the legacy lives on. Saturday Night Live did MacGruber with its skits with Will Forte, which were hilarious, which was basically a bumbling MacGyver, you know, a comedic take on MacGyver. And they even did a feature film of MacGruber,
a full-length movie
a few years later. And so that just tells you right there that the MacGyver legacy lives on. And it almost makes it bigger than it really was, because it was a moderate hit for ABC. It wasn't, I don't think it was ever super duper huge as far as the ratings and stuff goes. But that's the thing. Everybody remembers MacGyver, and it's part of the collective social consciousness of the United States, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't an explosive thing, but it was always popular. And with the MacGruber and all this stuff, you know, it's like impersonation and parody is like the ultimate form of flattery,
right?
You know, because you're only going to impersonate or parody something that's big and popular and that you love, you know, or people love in general. It's something that people are going to recognize and notice. You know, obviously it made a huge impact on people in general. I mean, this show had a legacy.
So there you have it, folks. MacGyver, the pilot episode of MacGyver, Drunk TV. Hey, visit us, drunktvpodcast.com. Also, patreon.com/drunktv. That's where you can support us if you like what you hear and want us to keep doing shows. Also, remember, like, comment, send us an email, send us a message, and share this. Share the podcast with your friends, share it with whoever, and anything like that you do helps us and helps the show find an audience and get out there. And we're just two guys who are enjoying watching TV, especially old TV, old classic TV, popular TV, obscure TV, forgotten TV. We're just here watching it, bringing it up again, hashing it out again, because we couldn't do stuff like this back in '85 where some fans could just sit back and BS about popular culture. That's right, folks. Next week, cheers. We're going to be doing It's Sam and Diane, where everybody knows your name.
Boom, boom, boom.
That's right. Hey, we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us on Drunk TV.